anyways, well, with that, what we're gonna, I'll have a handout for you to take home with the PowerPoints, the notes from the PowerPoint slides. But what you have tonight is just a small listening sheet. There are pencils back there on the table if anybody needs one. But again, the purpose of this, what we're doing is just walking slowly through the book of Acts. And the idea behind this is we get to a place. Last week we did an introduction, and we continued this unhindered movement of God, the growing disciples through the study of the book of Acts. The idea behind that is just that God is moving, and that's really His gospel is moving, and that's what you see. We came up with the primary purpose of the book of Acts was to show the unhindered movement of the gospel into the world. And where the gospel, or not the gospel of Acts, but the book of Acts ends in Paul in Rome as a prisoner, and he has unhindered access to the people to preach the gospel. And we know that the church is going to continue to explode in growth and grow. And one of the things we determined out of that is that it's imperative that we embrace the gospel, because gospel is going to go forward with us or without us. So you come to that place, but we want to move into this second part, and what we want to see with this is really we're going to look here at Acts 1:3, and that A means just the first half of the verse. Somebody read that, what that says, looking at that, just that very first part.
After his suffering, he showed himself to these men and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive.
Okay. After his suffering, he showed himself to these men. Who were these men that we're talking about? The apostles, okay? And these convincing proofs that he was alive. Why do you, again, I'm a little mesmerized by that they're standing in front of the risen Lord, that he would have to continue to give proofs of what, that he was alive. What was it that you think caused that to come to that place of needing that extra reassurance?
Well, some of the Romans and the Jews and whatever said, well, he's just, somebody took him, or
right.
Or he just hid away. Or...
Okay. There was that sense, there were those things, but again, it's just very unnatural. It's a very unnatural thing for somebody who is dead to be back alive. And they saw that, and again, but we want to talk just for a minute about some of the immediate proofs that were provided for them. One of the ones was, I think there was a proof just simply by claiming a bodily resurrection. This was prior to his death and resurrection. He told them, I'm going to rise, my body is going to rise from the dead. Not my ideas, not my spirit, but my body. Why does that make that? What's the significance behind claiming that his body was going to rise?
Show that it wasn't a spirit, like a spirit, but a physical person.
It's empirical. I mean, it's empirical. If how do you prove somebody's spirit rises, or somebody's ideas? Maybe they're ideas or something, but the idea, he said, this body is going to rise, it requires proof that happened. And so again, he makes that claim. I had a great uncle who was of a quasi-Christian group that claims, one of the claims is that Jesus came back in 1914. And I asked him about that one time, and he said, well, if you're enlightened, you know. If you're enlightened, you know. If you're, it was his spirit came back, and that was the example. Again, you could say that of anything, but again, so I think his claim before these events is one of the proofs. Another thing is that by appearing to many people simultaneously. Appearing to many people simultaneously. The idea behind this is, again, if I came into you and said, hey, I saw Jesus today, you might believe me. You might not. But one of the things about that is it's my word against, maybe you think I'm a little nutty. I've gone a little. Oh, okay, Mark, I'm glad you saw Jesus today. That's really, really good. But again, it's just my word and somebody coming and saying that. The second, well, maybe too, I say, well, I saw Jesus. And then Brad says, well, I saw Jesus too. But again, not at the same time. And again, maybe both of us. But what if this whole room were together and we all saw Jesus at the same time? What credibility does that lend to the statement? It's a lot of credibility. Matter of fact, what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, he says that he appeared to 500 people at the same time. And a lot of people, one of the claims about Jesus, they were just delusional. They were having a hallucination. Well, one of the problems with the hallucination theory is how do 500 people have the same hallucination at the same time? It's just not feasible. So again, one of the proofs is that he appeared to many people simultaneously. A third point is this. He allowed himself to be touched. To be touched. So there was a body there, and that proves that. Somebody, real quick, I'm going to go to the next point, but somebody look at 1 John 1 in the first 4 verses. Somebody turn to 1 John 1. Fran's going there. And so just a minute, we'll come back. You got it already, Fran?
Yes.
Okay, hang on one second. Let's look at this next point, because here's the other one. What?
First John what?
Brad's got it. Brad's got it. He beat you to it. So another thing he did, by eating and drinking with his disciples. I'm reading devotionally through the book of Acts right now, and I was reading through the 10th and 11th chapter, and one of the things it talked about was even then Peter says to people he's talking to, after he rose, we ate and drank with him. And what's significant about that?
Shows that he was living.
He was alive. I mean, and able to consume food and drink and those types of things. Read that 1 John 1 verses 1 through 4, I believe.
That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched. This we proclaim concerning the word of life. The life appeared, we have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with the Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete.
Okay. One of the things I've always taken that to mean from John to mean that, just that appearing while he was with them, and I think there's that sense. But I as I've studied this, I think maybe John writing that may even have referenced, and it may be a sense of reference after the resurrection, they experienced those things. That we were with him, and his body was real. It was there, and we saw it, and we touched it, and we fellowshiped with him. We ate with him. We drank with him. Then the last one I have is just by opening our mind to the Scriptures. He gave proof the opening your mind to the Scriptures. Again, you find that in Luke, the last chapter of Luke 24, that he was there in front of them, but he taught them from the Scriptures of what was supposed to happen to him, and that all these things had come true. So again, these are the proofs that Jesus gave in the first century, in the 40 days from his resurrection to his ascension, to show them that he was alive. We go on from that, and what I want to see is we're going to do for the next few weeks, we're going to talk, and these are my 8 C's of believing. I call them the C of believing, excuse me. I do these C's because it helps me remember them. It gives me a way. It's very preachery, I guess, of me to do that, and some people are critical, but my mind works in such a way I've got to form it in a fashion that I can remember it and be able to talk about it on a basis without having to go back to notes and things like that. And so I came up with these C's. One of the things, I've actually have 12 of them now. but I'm only going to share with you 8 of those. Let me just, we talk about general revelation and specific or special revelation. And I don't know if I have these broken down exactly right. I think my last one in general revelation probably ought to go over into specific. But we're going to look at scripture verses to show this. Let me give these just very quickly. In that, first of all, the idea of choice. This is going to deal with the issue of faith. We also have the issue of creation. God has revealed himself through creation. God has revealed himself through conscience, a moral law, and by correspondence. I mean that by the scriptures. All these are out of the book of out of the book of Romans. That we'll be looking there. On the others, we see the issue, and you look at 1 Corinthians 15, the idea, not just there, but specifically there, I think states something, the idea of changed lives, consequences. I kind of sound like Alex Trebek, don't I? Consequences. Common sense. Then finally, circumstance. For changed lives and consequences are found out of 1 Corinthians 15, and we find common sense and circumstances out of John 6 and John 9. And again, those are the things we'll be looking at. We're going to concentrate on the idea of choice, though, tonight. Romans 1, 16 and 17 says this, for in the gospel a righteousness from God is revealed, revealed. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. So when I talk about choice, in my mind, what I'm saying in this is an issue of faith. It's an issue of belief. Choosing to believe in God, in Jesus as the Christ, as the Son of God. And so that's the idea, again, that comes from that. And that's found again in Romans 1, 16 and 17. There's some other things that we talk about here. We find faith defined. Well, somebody read it. Can you see that on the screen? What is the, if in Hebrews 12:1, faith is defined. Can you see it? Read it.
Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see.
Okay. There's a certainty there, a sureness and a certainty, again, of what we hope for. And that really relates back to what we find here in this passage somewhat. Again, it's an issue of faith and our gospel of righteousness from first to last, just as again it is written. But you see this defined nature of what faith is. Again, it's a sureness of what we hope for and a certainty of what we do not see. Another of this is 1 Peter 3:15. This is a passage you ought to know. It's one, okay, whatever. Somebody's blinging my stuff here. We're getting an email or something. Peter wrote here, he says, but in your heart set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Okay, again, this is the idea here of giving that hope comes out of that faith that we have. And then with that, we find the goals for our session. These are the goals for our session. One of the first things I want to happen through this session and through this whole session looking at the seeds of belief is to increase your faith and confidence in the gospel. To increase your faith and confidence in the gospel. I think it's interesting when you read through, particularly the Gospel of John, the 2nd chapter of John, it says the disciples believed in Jesus. There was a belief there in Jesus. And one of the things that when you get into the wedding at Cana, when Jesus turns the water into wine, and it says at the very end of that, and the disciples believed. Now, was that the first time they believed, or was that an increase in belief? There was again, I want you to increase your faith, your confidence in the gospel. When that grows and you're certain of those things, you're sure of those things, what does that do to your witness and to your ability to live out this life when you know this is true? How does it change things?
Well, it gives you that assurance to share it.
Right, okay. It gives you that assurance to, and really, that really goes to the second point in there, and are both of them up? Yeah. It gives you a system. I want to give you a systematic model to defend your beliefs. I want to give you a systematic model to defend your beliefs, to be able to talk about these things. Now, William Lane Craig says something about apologetics, and this is what we're talking about, defending the faith in these things. He says something I think is very important. Your goal in apologetics is not to win an argument. It's to win a person. Remember that. Your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to win a person. And so how does that change? If we want to debate and win an argument, we can do that and destroy somebody, and they turn away from the gospel and never hear it. The idea is we want people to be able to hear the gospel, to believe in that. And so, again, that's just I think an important point, important that we look at this with and see that, again, we're using this. I look at apologetics. In football, you have offense and defense. Most sports, you have offense and defense. And I see apologetics as somewhat defensive. It is something that we defend the faith, that we're holding up some things. But the gospel, the sharing of the gospel, is our offense. One of the things that in football, if your defense is on the field the whole game, what's probably going to happen to your team? They're probably going to lose. Not always, but most of the time. If the other team's offense dominates the game, there's a good chance that your team's going to lose. So we do want to be able to defend our faith, but we've got to have the other side of that, and we'll get to that later of defending the faith. But so we go on, and one of the things I want to see this last verse on choice. This goes all the way back into Joshua 24:15. Probably many of us have this verse up on our wall someplace in our homes. It's very popular, but it says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Okay, again, it's that choice there. We're choosing to serve God. I mean, it really brings us to the next point in this is we're going to, again, continue to talk about choice. And the next point is I want to talk about the law. I want to introduce, and maybe something you've heard, the law of non-contradiction. And why I'm stating this is going back to the verse in Joshua, he gives them a choice. He said, you either serve the gods back in Egypt, or the gods of your forefathers, or you serve the Lord. It was a clear choice that was given there. We live in a world of relativism. Anybody know define relativism for me? Anybody can define that? What it means to be relativistic, or to have a relative belief? It means all things are simply relative. Nothing's really true. You can't really know what's true.
That's your definition.
Huh? That's my definition. Maybe not. Yeah, I may be wrong. That's my definition. That's your opinion of what that is, and that's a good point. That's a way to illustrate it.
That's how they do it.
You know, one of the ways to come back at that is, so you're saying all truth is relative is an absolute truth, right? You hear that? If your relative beliefs are absolute, that is, and you understand what that does? It just defeats the argument. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. All truth is relative. Absolutely. Well, when you do that, you just defeat they defeat their own argument. So we need to understand the law of non-contradiction, and really the idea here is either the Christian or the atheist or the pagan or whatever is right. Both beliefs cannot be true. When Joshua gave them a choice, he laid the choice out before them. It was a clear choice. It's either the God of Israel, the God that you serve, or it's the God of Egypt, the many gods, and worshiping those things. So know that again, when we look at this, the idea that we're making a clear choice to follow God or not. What we see is this. All people believe or have faith in something. Do you believe that? All people believe or have a faith in something. I think they do. Let me tell you why. Let's talk about Richard Dawkins. Anybody know who Richard Dawkins is? Richard Dawkins is, and I'm going to use him a lot. He's a scientist, but he's also a semi-philosopher, I guess. And he is not just an atheist; he is an anti-theist. He is angry with God. He's angry at Christians. He's angry all people of belief, but within that, he is just. He tells people, they say, what do we do with these Christians? And he said, make fun of them, slander them, make them just humiliate them is what he says. He wrote The God Delusion is the book that he wrote. But in this, I think it's interesting. It's not that Richard Dawkins, an atheist, has no faith. Rather, he or she has faith in nothing. You see the difference? It's not an issue of no faith. It's a faith in nothing. Richard Dawkins, if you press him in an interview, and I've read this and I've seen it, if you press him in an interview, he was asked one time, matter of fact, if one was absolute proof that God exists, and seven was absolute proof God does not exist, where would you place yourself? Now, you'd think a guy like that would be 7. But you know what his answer was? 6. 6.
There's still hope.
Not for him. He doesn't believe that hope. He does. He wishes he could make it a 7. He just recognizes
And nothing can be absolute.
and nothing can be absolute in that.
Mm.
That if you push him, he says, well, I'm 99.999% sure there's no God, but yeah, I admit, if you push him on it, that I can't prove that. And so, again, we find this idea here of again, that they place their faith in nothing. I'll tell this story. I'll be careful, because I'm being videotaped and it's going to go out from here. I know a person that was working on an advanced degree in science, in the science field, a doctorate in science. And they were in a class one day, and one of the fellow doctoral candidates said in a discussion, used the word belief. They used the word believe, and the professor just came down on this person hard and said, do not ever use that word in my class. We're not talking about believing anything. It's what we know. It's what we know. Only the empirical, only the natural, only the material is all that matters, and just absolutely got the message. It wasn't with, and a few minutes later in a lecture that this same professor was talking about Richard Dawkins, again, within the science field, in a very positive way, but she says, well, it's Dr. Dawkins's conviction. Conviction. Well, what's a conviction? A strongly held belief. So talk out of both sides of their mouth. Choosing God, just understand, choosing God is an act of faith. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. It's important that we understand. Matter of fact, you go back to the scriptures we read earlier, just the importance of that issue that we look at. We can't separate the fact that it's faith. But what I want you to understand, I don't believe, and this is where we're going to go in the weeks to come, it's not a blind faith. It's not a blind faith. Jesus was willing to give proofs to his disciples that he was alive. He gave empirical evidence to them that he was alive. And I think these things, we have a reasonable faith. We have a faith that can stand up to all kinds of criticism and all kinds of challenges. It has for 2,000 years, and it will continue to do so. So know that just because you have faith in God doesn't mean you're the only one that has faith. But we have a faith that can be substantiated on a lot of different things that we're going to be looking at. Here's where this begins. I presume there's a God. This is the beginning, not the end of my defense for the hope that I have. What does it mean to presume something? To presume?
You're pretty sure.
What's to believe? I took that word and I put it and highlighted it and took my thesaurus, and it's to believe. I mean, you can have some little less.
Assume beforehand.
Assume beforehand. How does that change the way, and this is where I want to get in some discussion real quick, how does that change the way you see the world if you begin with a belief in God? How does that change your outlook on the world? Let me reverse this for a minute. If you presume there is no God, how does that change your outlook on the world?
Lack of hope.
Lack of hope. Okay.
Very close-minded.
Very, very close-minded in a lot of cases.
There's nothing supernatural, no miracles.
No miracles, nothing supernatural. Only thing there is the material world. If you can't see it or touch it, it doesn't exist. Only the natural world. What does it do with your ethics?
Question mark.
Okay.
You know, I mean, what do you have to base it on?
Nothing.
I mean, you know, it's just,
I think that comes down to the person, personally. I mean,
I agree
and I
with
mean,
Katie.
only because I do know that there's people who don't necessarily believe in God, but
They're good people.
they're still good people.
Good people, absolutely.
So, I think it just depends on circumstance and
But I think the big difference is there's, yes, they're good people, but
Because what you're saying is that in order to have what we're saying is good ethics, you'd have to be a Christian. That's basically
No.
the-
no.
no.
Well, that's kind of like that's how I'm interpreting it.
Okay.
Because
I'm saying even the atheist has something to go back on it.
Okay.
I would argue, and I don't want to get too far into the moral argument because that's
Okay.
going to be a couple of weeks down the road where we get into this deeply with that. But let me reframe it.
Okay.
Most people who have a strong belief who are pro-abortion, most people who are strongly pro-abortion also have no belief in God. Most, not all, but most. The idea that when you survey them, everything becomes utilitarian. How useful is it?
Right.
How pragmatic is it? How, those types of arguments. And so it's like when we get into a discussion, maybe a debate, say of a moral, ethical issue like abortion, one of the things we got to know is where we're starting from. Are we presuming there's a God? Or are you presuming there's no God? Where do you start that argument from? What I want you to do is put yourself in the mind of maybe an atheist. And how would that change your beliefs? Mine would change dramatically. If I didn't think there was a God, all there is this. And if all there is this, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die,
And, some atheists, I'm saying some, because I have one that's kind of close in our family, that's an atheist. They think that there is a God, but they don't think that God can do anything for them.
Okay. That's probably a better definition. That's probably deism.
Yeah.
Deism, that yes, there's a God, but that God doesn't care and has no interaction with me personally or maybe the world at all and everything. And that's a pretty common belief.
Well, and the other thing, to go with what Katie was saying, if you kind of look at it in terms of, we think of somebody as good or bad, in what terms do we think of them as that?
what degree.
As our background. If we went to another country, would they still be considered a good or a bad person, given the mores and the morals and the laws of that country? How would that change? And a lot of ours is built on the Judeo-Christian background here in the United States, but in other countries it's very, very different. In other countries there are deaths that we would never approve of here, but yet they are so much apart and they are considered to be good in their background. So I think that makes.
And it all becomes a matter of opinion.
Yeah,
It's relative.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all relative. It's your opinion. It truly is. If there is no God, it's just your opinion. You think this is moral? Well, I don't. And so it's just my, it's my opinion against your opinion. Again, we're getting into that moral argument, which we'll delve into in a couple of weeks on a deeper level.
I won't go into the moral argument, but basically what it comes down to is an atheist has the ability to be good because they are in the image of God. They have the capacity to represent God. As far as cultural mores and stuff like that, that goes into cultural relativism and that whole idea there. If there is no objective God, then all there's left to do is for mankind to make up their own standard. But even when they make up a standard, the standard still exists. And that standard, as he'll prove next time whenever he gets into it, is proof that there is an ultimate standard.
Yeah, and that's what I think I mentioned this before. After World War II, again, some of you have heard this argument before. We went into Germany and we took the Nazis, who had committed these horrible crimes against humanity. And one of the things that happened in Germany prior to the war is they passed a law, particularly dealing with Jews and other people, that they declared them less than human. There were laws that were passed that they were less than human. And it was not wrong to kill them under German law. Well, their argument, when we put them on trial, at the Nuremberg trial, we put them on trial, was we were not breaking the law. We were operating within our, and the Allies came back, the people putting them on trial, and said, no, there is a law that is higher than your law. And it's the law of God, and you are being condemned under the law of God. Matter of fact, my understanding behind that, the bench where those judges sat in over those is the Ten Commandments. Is the Ten Commandments. Now we can't put those here anymore in our places, but those exist. So the idea, don't be afraid to just say, again, it's not the end of your argument, it's the beginning. It's the beginning. We start there and we move out from there to these other things that we've talked about in those 8 things. The last thing I want to give you tonight is this. Last week we talked about an app, Faith Life Study Bible app. I would encourage you to download that on your smartphone. Again, I asked that question. Most of you have the U version of the Bible. That's a good Bible app, a good devotional app to put on your phone. It's, again, devotionally something you can do different devotions, short-term devotions. It's right there on your phone. You always got it with you usually because you usually have your phone with you. But Faith Life would take you to able to do some Bible studies. But let me give you 4 apps, and they're different ones, different strengths and weaknesses with all of them. I don't know weaknesses, but they all have a different purpose. The first one, RZIM, is Ravi Zachariah International Ministries. It's more of a listening app. There are things you can go back and read. I primarily listen. He has a daily 15-minute program. Usually the Monday through Thursday is one sermon or something, or a series that he's talked on. But Fridays, if you want to take one day, Fridays he most always does a question. He's at an event when he takes questions from the audience, and those are those answers. You can get a good apologetic background by listening to him, just that 15 minutes a day. I usually do it when I'm walking, as when I listen to Ravi. I try to, I don't get the whole thing, I walk more than 15 minutes, but try to get that in there where we can, I can listen to him. And I've gotten a good grounding in he'll bend your mind a little bit, I'm telling you. He comes from India originally, was converted at about age 20, immigrated to the United States. Pretty powerful preacher. He goes in some of the most hostile places in the world, including Ivy League school campuses. And he said right now, they're jam-packed. He said, when I come in to speak, He said, we're amazed. Or one of my team members comes in to speak. They're standing room only. People are hungry. Students are hungry to hear. Another one is cross-examined. There's a section there called quick answers. It really, that question I gave you about the idea of, I think one of the ones I found, if you're getting ready to enter into a discussion with somebody, and begin by saying, if Christianity were proved true, would you become a Christian? If Christianity were proved to be true, would you become a Christian? He said, if the answer is no, even if you can prove it true and I'm still not becoming a Christian, you're wasting your breath. You're wasting your breath. Don't, if that's that sense, I love, Dallas Willard had an illustration that he used. He said he believes that there are some people that a 900-foot man in a white robe, a glowing robe, and a long beard and long white flowing hair could come and appear before them and say, yes, Charlie, I'm real. And if Charlie didn't believe, he would say, I was just having a bad dream. It could be that big a proof, and yet they would still deny, they would still look for some other answer there. So cross-examined is one. Stand to reason is another one. It's more topical. It's going to take on topical issues. It deals with the issues of same-sex marriage, of homosexuality, abortion. It talks about them from a Christian viewpoint and everything in there, and stand to reason. And the last one is reasonable faith, and this is William Lane Craig, probably the most challenging of the four. But he has some things in there. We'll see some. I've got one of his downloaded. I don't think we're going to watch it tonight, but we'll save that for another one. I was looking at some things, but there's some good little short 5-minute videos in there dealing with some of the other arguments that we're going to be having. So again, I just want to leave you with that. And so, any other questions? Any questions tonight that we have as we close this session? Any thoughts? Charlie, go ahead.